I remember the exact moment they laughed. It wasn't a cruel kind of laughter, it was worse. The kind that said, "Oh honey, you're not thinking this through." The kind that wraps itself in love but drips with doubt. I was 20 years old, sitting at the kitchen table with my parents and 3 older siblings, announcing that I was dropping out of college. Their reaction still echoes in my ears, but so does what came next, because none of them saw what I SAW'd. My name is Alina Khan, I'm 29 years old, and my tech company just went public with a valuation north of $300 million. I didn't take the conventional path, but every step, stumble, and sleepless night brought me here, and it all started with a broken campus printer and a really bad day. I was a second-year computer science major at a competitive university, constantly battling burnout. That day, I had a paper due, the printer at the dorm was jammed again, and the campus library was full. I was running across campus like a maniac when the idea hit me. Why was printing on campus such a nightmare in 2020? Why hadn't anyone fixed it? But what really bothered me was this: what if it wasn't just printing? What if students like me were silently drowning in all the small, inefficient systems no one had cared to improve? That night, I couldn't sleep, and not because of the grade I knew I'd miss. I stayed up sketching on my tablet. First the interface, then the flow, and finally, a concept I called Swift Connect, an all-in-one campus services app. Think Uber meets Slack, but for students, print queues, event bookings, tutoring requests, club payments, all in one place. I showed it to my roommate, half embarrassed. She stared at the screen, blinked once, and said, "Wait, why doesn't this exist already?" And that was the moment I realized I might be onto something. I spent the next 3 months coding like my life depended on it. I skipped classes, missed meals, and lived in the CS lab. I taught myself back-end systems from scratch and started building a prototype that actually worked. I had just enough front-end design experience to make it look decent, and enough caffeine in my veins to keep going. But then came the question I couldn't ignore: how long could I juggle school and this app before one broke? And it turns out, something did break, but not what I expected. My grades started slipping. My professors pulled me aside. One actually said, "Alina, you're too smart to throw this away." But the problem was, I didn't want to be just smart, I wanted to be useful. I saw a real-world problem, and I had a real-world solution. And then came the big decision: drop out and give this everything, or risk letting it die as just a cool idea. I never had the guts to finish the day I told my family. I was shaking so badly I spilled tea on my jeans. We were sitting at the dining table. I told them I was taking a leave from school to pursue my startup full-time. My mom froze. My dad squinted like he hadn't heard right. My sister chuckled and said, "Oh my god, she's serious." And then came the kind of laughter you don't forget, the "you'll grow out of this" laugh. "Alina, sweetie, you're not Steve Jobs," my brother said, trying to be cute. I smiled politely, but inside, something hardened. I knew that from that day forward, I'd have to prove them all wrong. With what little savings I had, I rented a tiny co-working desk in a shared space. My only luxury was a $4 coffee each morning to feel like a real entrepreneur. I networked like crazy, pitched to anyone who would listen, and cold emailed 73 university administrators asking if they'd try a demo. 71 ignored me. One told me it was a security risk. But one, just one, replied and said, "Can you come in this Friday?" That Friday turned out to be the first real door that opened. The school was a small private college 2 hours away. Their tech director was an alum who loved startups. He saw my app, asked a few questions, and said, "You built this yourself?" I nodded, exhausted and hopeful. He scratched his chin and said, "If you can integrate with our login system and offer payment tracking, I'll let you pilot it next semester." I walked out of that office like I had just been handed $1 million check, except now, I actually had to deliver on my promise. Those next 6 months nearly broke me. I worked 18-hour days, teaching myself more about cybersecurity and FERPA compliance than anyone human should. I found a mentor on Reddit of all places, an ex-Google engineer named Sarah who reviewed my code and pushed me to level up. She became my silent guardian. "This is solid, Alina," she finally messaged. "You've got something real here." I printed that message and pinned it above my desk. IT reminded me that someone, even a stranger, believed in me before the world did. The pilot launched quietly in January. No PR, no launch party, just a working version of Swift Connect on a tiny campus. But by March, 78% of students had downloaded it. The printing queue feature alone saved students 15 minutes a day on average. Word spread. Other campuses started calling. I was still broke, still barely sleeping, but something had shifted. Suddenly, I wasn't chasing people. They were chasing me, but attention doesn't always mean money, and that became my next hurdle. I knew I needed funding. I entered pitch competitions, joined accelerator programs, and showed up at every female founder meetup I could find. Investors kept telling me the same thing: it's a nice idea, but it's niche. I wanted to scream. Niche? Half the planet is under 30. Education tech was exploding. But the world of venture capital wasn't built for girls like me, brown-skinned, hoodie-wearing, self-taught techies with no Ivy League badge, until I met Priya Bhatt. Priya was a former founder turned angel investor, and she got it. I dropped out too, she said during our first coffee meeting. It's terrifying, isn't it? I nodded, and that was it, connection. She invested $50,000 of her own money, then introduced me to 2 other women-led funds. Within 2 months, I closed a $500,000 seed round. I hired a real developer. I bought better servers. And for the first time, SwiftConnect became we, not just me, but scaling a company brings a new kind of chaos, one I wasn't ready for. We grew from 1 school to 12 in under a year. Then came the big fish, a state university with 40,000 students. We signed a 3-year contract. I was hiring fast, flying coast to coast, pitching on Zoom, building decks at midnight, solving bugs at 2 a.m. My inbox was a war zone. I had to learn how to lead while still learning what it meant to be a CEO, and in the midst of all that, I got an email that made my stomach twist. It was from my dad. He wanted to meet for coffee. No agenda, just let's talk. We sat outside, our favorite old cafe. He asked questions, real ones, not sarcastic ones. How's it going? How many people work for you now? Then he paused and said, your mother and I were wrong. We just didn't want to see you struggle, but we're proud of you. I didn't cry then. I saved the tears for the drive home, because even warriors need their parents' blessing sometimes. Over the next 2 years, we expanded to over 100 campuses and introduced AI scheduling and real-time alerts. Our user base hit 1.2 million. One of the big 5 tech firms tried to buy us. I said no. My dream wasn't a quick exit. It was a revolution in how students interact with campus life. I wanted to fix what had nearly broken me, and do it on my own terms, but then came the offer I couldn't ignore. An underwriter approached us with the idea of going public. I laughed at first. We were still so young. But then they showed me the numbers, the momentum, the timing. We spent 8 months prepping, due diligence, filings, roadshows. It was another full-time job stacked on top of an already full-time job. But the day our stock ticker lit up, I stood on that floor, rang that bell, and thought, they laughed when I dropped out. Now, I was the one laughing, with a mic in my hand and the world watching. So, what's it like now? It's wild. I'm still the same hoodie-wearing girl who drinks too much coffee and hates small talk. I mentor young founders. I donate to scholarships for women in tech. And sometimes, I drive by my old campus and just smile, because that broken printer? It was the best thing that ever happened to me. Let me tell you something I wish someone had told me at 20. No one will believe in your dream until you do. People will laugh, doubt, even love you while underestimating you. Let them. Because the laughter you hear today might just be the applause you earn tomorrow, and trust me, nothing sounds sweeter than that. But going public wasn't the finish line. In many ways, it was the starting gun for a marathon I didn't even realize I had entered. Suddenly, I had shareholders, analysts, board members. Every decision felt like it echoed in a stadium. I was no longer just solving student problems, I was managing people's expectations, careers, and futures, and there was one future I hadn't thought about in a long time, my own. I started waking up at 3 a.m., not from anxiety, but from still working. My friends would call and I'd forget to answer for days. My team would beg me to take breaks, but I kept pushing. I'm fine, I'd say. This is what I signed up for. But somewhere along the way, I began to lose the girl who once coded for 18 hours straight because she believed in something, not just to meet quarterly goals. Then something happened that finally forced me to stop. Sarah, the mentor from Reddit who helped me in my early days, got diagnosed with breast cancer. She messaged me out of the blue one night. Don't burn out, Alina, she said. The world needs you alive, not just successful. I cried. For an hour that night, I realized I hadn't called my mom in 2 weeks. I hadn't seen a sunrise that wasn't from my office window. I was becoming the machine I had once rebelled against, and that realization cracked something open in me. I took a 2-week break. No email, no Slack, no Zoom. I traveled to the northern mountains alone, sat in silence, and asked myself, if this all disappeared tomorrow, would I still be proud of who I became? It was a hard question, but when I looked back, at the dorm, the dining table, the ridicule, the rise, I realized I had built something no one could take away from me, but I also knew I had to change how I lived with it. When I returned, I didn't step down. I stepped up, but differently. I brought in a president to help run operations. I started a wellness fund for our employees. I made therapy part of our health plan. I began saying no more often and trusting my team more. And instead of obsessing over being perfect, I started focusing on being present, and that's when everything truly came full circle. 1 year after our IPO, I was invited to give the commencement speech at my old university, the same one I dropped out of. I stood at that podium in front of 8,000 people, wearing a sleek navy suit, hair tied back, palms slightly sweaty. My parents sat in the front row. I looked at the students and said, sometimes the riskiest thing you can do isn't dropping out, it's staying on a path that isn't yours. The applause hit like a wave. But what came after was even more surreal. That a girl came up to me afterward. She looked 19, nervous, wide-eyed. I've built an app, she said. And I don't know if I should pursue it or stay in school. I looked her in the eyes and said, the question isn't which is right. The question is, which one scares you more? Go there. That's where growth lives. She nodded. And I saw myself in her, the version of me who just needed one person to believe, and it reminded me that legacy isn't just about what you build, it's about who you lift to today. Swift Connect is in 350 plus campuses worldwide. We've added mental health integration, real-time safety alerts, even AI peer matching for study groups. But the thing I'm most proud of? We're 60% female-led and over 40% POC, because I didn't just want to change the game. I wanted to change who gets to play it, and trust me, we're just getting started. So when people ask me what success looks like, I don't point to the stock price or the office or the media features. I point to the girl who walked into a coffee shop with nothing but a stubborn heart and a broken printer behind her. I point to the nights of doubt, the laughter I turned into fuel, the idea that refused to stay quiet, and the best part? I wouldn't rewrite any of it, because when your family laughs at your dream, and you still chase it anyway, that's how legends begin. But here's what they don't tell you: after success, there's grief and growth. I mourned versions of myself I'd never be again, the scrappy coder, the girl who ran on instant noodles and borrowed Wi-Fi. Success has a way of erasing your roots if you're not careful. I never wanted to forget the struggle. So I started journaling, not for the world, but for myself. And one night, that journal entry sparked an unexpected idea. What if we told the stories of student founders still in the making? I scribbled. I thought of all the Alinas out there, pitching to empty rooms, building alone, dreaming in silence. That's when the idea hit me like lightning: a nonprofit incubator, exclusively for first-gen student entrepreneurs. No tuition. No fancy connections required. Just talent, grit, and mentorship. I called it First Light, because sometimes all someone needs is a bit of it to rise. Within 6 months, we launched our first cohort. 15 students, 10 countries, all under 25. We gave them funding, mentors, and most importantly, belief. And watching them pitch, fail, restart, and rise reminded me why I started Swift Connect in the first place. I wasn't trying to be famous. I just wanted to build things that made people's lives easier. But now, I saw something even more valuable than impact. I saw the ripple effect. One of the students, a 22-year-old from Karachi, messaged me after her pitch night. Alina, she wrote, you didn't just change my career, you changed my mother's opinion of me. I read that line twice, then cried quietly at my desk. Because for every door I kicked open, I realized I wasn't walking through it alone. I was carrying voices that had once been silenced, including my own. The press started calling again, but this time, I wasn't interested in cover stories. I wanted policy change. So I began advocating for tech equity in education, testifying at panels, lobbying for access to basic infrastructure at community colleges. Some said I was drifting too far from business. But I wasn't drifting. I was expanding, because when you finally have a seat at the table, your job isn't to eat quietly, it's to make more seats. At AT30, I wrote my first book. Not a memoir, an open-source playbook for student founders, with code snippets, pitch templates, and chapters like How to Survive Doubt When It Lives in Your Own House. It hit bestseller lists within days. But the real win? Emails from young women saying, I showed this to my dad. He finally gets it now. And that, to me, was worth more than any investor check. Still, not everything was perfect. I faced burnout again. I had to fire someone I once called a friend. I missed a cousin's wedding because I was stuck negotiating a vendor crisis in Tokyo. There were moments I felt lonelier than ever, moments I looked in the mirror and asked, is this all worth it? But every time I considered stepping away, I thought of the alternative: not trying, not fighting, and that silence scared me more than any failure ever could. So I keep going. But now, I pace myself. I take Sundays off. I say no when my body says rest. I have dinner with my parents every other week, yes, even the ones who once laughed. And now they ask thoughtful questions like, what's next for your students? Or, did you read that story about the kid in your program? We don't talk about the past much. We just live in the pride of the present. Last week, I visited one of the campuses where Swift Connect first launched. A freshman tapped me on the shoulder. You're Alina, right? I nodded. She grinned. My professor told us your app helped fund our new mental health wing. I had no idea. Apparently, the university had reinvested the platform revenue into student wellness. I smiled, stunned. Sometimes, your work echoes in places you'll never see, but it finds its way back to you. And here's the truth I want every girl to know, the one building in secret, scared to speak her dream out loud, you don't have to be fearless. You just have to be stubborn. You don't need permission. You need fire. And the ones who laugh, let them. One day, they'll call it resilience. Or better yet, they'll call it vision, because the day my company went public wasn't my greatest achievement. It was the day I stopped waiting for anyone else to believe and finally believed in myself. And that story? It's still being written.